before Bethlehem, Jesus in the manger, the Savior of the world, coming to do what God has sent him to do. There's a whole backstory, y'all. There's a whole genealogy, a family tree, just like you got, just like I got. And oftentimes we just skip over these names, and we find in the Gospel of Matthew that there are 5 women in the genealogy of Jesus. And the second lady is a lady named Rahab. Now, Rahab had no business being in the family tree of Jesus. And in fact, what I've learned about myself is I ain't got no business being in his family either, you know what I'm saying? But Rahab, she was a harlot. She was somebody that was running a business in the walls of Jericho. And God used her to stove up some spies, and it was amazing to see how God miraculously saved this woman because she had faith in God. And she's the lady that hung the red scarlet thread outside of the window, and when the walls of Jericho came down, her life was saved. What does this teach you and I? Man, you may be watching this and you may be hanging on by a thread right now. You may have done some things in your life and got in a situation where you didn't think you had any business being around God or his people, but God still has given you faith. And you think that, man, I'm hanging on by a thread and I have no business being with God and God's people, but you haven't understood the grace of God. You haven't understood the mercy of God. You need to know the story of Rahab, that God in his divine mercy and his divine grace would use this woman to help save his people, and then he would save her, and then he would not only save her, but he would restore her, that she no longer was a harlot. She was no longer known by her past life. Then when she hung that thread of hope out that window and was saved, God not only saved her, but he gave her a family. She would go on to marry a man named Salmon, and they would have a life together. They would have children, so much so that God would use those children to have more children that would have more children, and so on and so forth, that Rahab would become in the lineage of Jesus Christ. So what does this mean for you? What does that mean for me? See, here's what you need to get from the life of Rahab, that God, if he could give mercy, if he could give grace, if he could repurpose, save, redeem, and use a person like Rahab, then he can use a person like you, and he could use a person like me. That God is abundant in his grace, he is abundant in his mercy, and he has a way of taking people that may be hanging on by a thread of hope. He has a way of taking them and saving them and then using them for his glory and for his purposes.